Hello and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Cohen. On this episode, we'll discuss the most recent Virginia General Assembly session, which began in January and closed in March. The legislature ultimately passed a 2-year state budget during a special session in late June, narrowly averting a government shutdown. Affordability was the watchword of the session. This year, the Democrats controlled both houses of the legislature as well as the governor's mansion. Key legislative actions and outcomes from the session included a 2-year spending plan that included a 4% pay raise for teachers over 2 years, a 3.5 salary increase for state employees, and an increased standard tax deduction. The package featured a new energy consumption fee on data centers and enabled referendums on a local level for a possible 1% sales tax to help fund school construction. To help us sort through this and more, we've invited State Senator Tara Durant on the program. Well, let's get started. Welcome, Tara. We're really glad to have you on here again.
Thank you. Yes, it's been good to be back.
And I mean, a lot of people already know you've been on our podcast a couple times, but just if you want to give a brief bio or what you're doing, and how you've been really active. First as in the House and now in the Senate, with doing things. So if you want to give a little bio or...
Sure. Yes. I mean, my family and I, we've lived in Stafford County. Gosh, it's been since 2003 is when we moved here, and we were in Northern Virginia for 5 years before that. And so we are very much your quintessential Stafford family. Husband's a Marine, active duty and then reserves, and raised our family here. And then just by the way life happens, sometimes I end up getting elected to the Virginia House of Delegates. Same year Glenn Youngkin came in, so election was 2021, and served in the House for 2 years, and then was elected to the Virginia Senate. So, time flies when you're having fun. I'm coming up on my last session. So.
Well, and you've had several different citizens committees that you put together that are really great. You've proposed, and I say you, but you give credit to all the people who are on it, which was great. You did one for mental health, which really has been praised by school systems and colleges as a way to help get more people to help with mental health issues, particularly with students and young people. And that was sort of you putting together a group, and that's really neat. And you worked across the aisle to get it done.
Well, let's just give her credits due, because that started off with a right out of the gate breakfast between you and me, and where you said, would you be willing? And I was so excited. And so it all got started because you gave that gentle nudge and say, would you be willing? So I always credit you for this.
And I credit you and everybody else, because I didn't do anything other than say, hey, what about?
Yeah. That's how I see it.
So, hey, what about? We just had the Virginia legislative session, which was a short session.
Was it short?
Yeah. For those who are not obsessively compulsive about this, there's a short session, which is theoretically 2 months long, and then the longer one, which is a little bit longer, 3 months.
This is the long one. Mm-hmm.
Okay. This year was the long one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. This is a long year.
So next year will be
the short session.
Shorter.
Correct.
But then it ended up going in overtime because of different issues not being settled.
It did.
It's sort of funny. I'll start with this: is that I when I'm teaching all my students, whether high school or when I taught college, I always have a thing about if you have the executive and then both houses of the chambers are the same party, in theory things are supposed to go so much smoother, but in reality it never does. And then usually I point to DC for that, but this year we pointed to Richmond for that.
Yes.
So. I guess one of the questions as an overall thing about the session as in general, and then we can get into some of the nitty gritty of what you thought was different, difficult, changeable, whatever, in all the various legislative machinations.
Yeah, I think the crown is heavy when you have one party in control, and that was revealed pretty early on. And you've maybe some jockeying between the governor's mansion and the House, the Speaker, the Senate. And so they were, everyone's trying to figure out their way, and the legislative priorities coming right out of the gate from the election. And I think then we started to kind of see maybe some friction. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And one of the challenges with this session is I don't think the House had bill limits. So the sheer volume that they were trying to work their way through was pretty incredible. And I was just bracing myself once we had crossover, that halfway point in the session when the bills that did survive out of the House came over the Senate, and just the sheer amount that we were going to be hearing in our committees. So it was intense.
And for the people who, again, that like obsessed with this, the normal process is you have a certain amount of time for one chamber to work on their bills,
Correct.
and the other chamber deals their bills, and then they cross over. So
Yeah.
they have a crossover day, and anything that hasn't been passed by that day is il morte. It's
Yeah.
dead. But I remembered in the past when I was on the board and you all were coming, there was a limit on House bills. How many
It
House
depends
bills?
on what the Rules Committee and what each chamber decides. So we had a limit in the Senate and the House did not. So you had a lot of new members in the House, and so, eager new members. And so there was a lot that they had to work their way through. And I don't think that all the bills were heard in committee. I think some were just did not have the time.
Right.
And they were triaged in terms of priorities.
And it also this sort of shows it's a diverse state. I'm trying to think of you could take a Rhode Island, which yes, there's some fishing interests and some manufacturing, but it's a small. There's a tiny little bit of rural communities, but it's not really as diverse. Virginia is really
Incredibly diverse. Yes.
And if people are going to represent their constituents in their areas, then it is going to cause some of that friction.
Of course.
So it's not even, may not be ideological at some point. It may well just be, hey, this is my people wanting to do this. This is why I like to do, we had dual enrollment government and we had state and local. And so I had everybody represent different parts of the state.
Yeah.
And they found it really difficult to think, I want to do X, but my voters wouldn't like it. And and even though they theoretically don't get reelected because we run out of time, they were always
welcome to our world.
Yes. So, all right. So in details, anything in particular about the session or having a new governor and, versus the old governor? Because there's obviously going to be differences in style and priorities.
Very much so. And I think that the theme that both parties emerged in the beginning of this session was about affordability. That was really the word that we were all discussing, and how we were going to be facilitated to make Virginia more affordable for families and its taxpayers, and for businesses too, and for our veterans and all those that make this Commonwealth who we are. But we have very different visions about what affordability looks like. And so I think right out of the gate, you saw a myriad of it must have been a slew of 40 plus bills that had new taxes that were proposed, and they got what we call in Richmond a fever, and that took a national narrative. And I think that the other side of the aisle and the governor's mansion probably were a little bit reeling from seeing the backlash that was so swift and so strong, not just in Richmond, but nationwide. We were getting a lot of attention, the Commonwealth was, and maybe that was unexpected. So here's one thing that I point out that I would love people to not forget is that when we hear a lot of those bills, they did not pass. It's important to remember that they were continued, which means they did not technically die. And a lot of the patrons, a lot of those delegates and senators that carried these really significant fundamental changes that would have had pretty significant tax implications for businesses and private individuals, is these were carried by those in leadership. So probably my number one instinct, I would say, is I suspect those were what we call administration bills. I have no authority to say that one way or another, but those are indicators based on what I know in my 6 years of serving in the General Assembly, is that if you have someone in leadership that is carrying some pretty robust policy changes, this probably worked with administration on that, and then they end up not being heard this session. So they've been continued to be continued, as we say.
And so they can come up in next year's session.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so, and just out of curiosity, so would they have to reintroduce those,
If they're
or they
continued,
just
no.
they pop up? So
No,
they would just get
they're
assigned to
assigned to
committees.
committee, they're there. So if
Okay.
they're continued, that means it's not a part of their bill limit because they've already been continued.
Okay. And then it was interesting. Channel 7 WJLA really did a well informed presentation
Mm,
of the different bills.
yeah.
In fact, several teachers around the county use that as to sort of have students figure out what do you think about this if you had to vote on it,
Mm,
which way would you vote on it, and it was really interesting to hear the students' interpretation of
I'd love to hear that.
gym memberships or babysitting bills or taxes or
The
walking
leaf
dogs
blowers,
taxes.
did they talk?
Yes.
I've never seen anything so swift as the leaf blowers. And that came through my committee last year. So I saw a lot of these bills that passed on really a partisan vote, but then Governor Youngkin vetoed them. So we knew what was going to happen and what would happen this year. And that one was swift.
No pun intended.
Yeah. But that was I had more people reaching out about this gas leaf blower bill.
Right, and then wasn't there an electric lawnmowers and things bill, so that it's sort of like many of the students were like, this is counterintuitive. If your idea is to get people off gas, why are you charging them a tax on electric?
Thank you.
You know, so
Welcome to the side.
really, so it was really interesting to hear the students do that, because it
Yeah.
was like, because often what I would do and the other teachers would do is say, here they are, you've given it, write up what you think, and they
Yeah.
couldn't even really go on. That's one of the things they can't go on AI to find the answers for. It's sort of like, what do you think of such and such?
Yeah.
So there also was some talk that was put out in the media about there being a vast number of bipartisan bills passed.
Mm,
And again, WJIL did a great job of listing them. And then I and several other people actually looked at them, and almost every bill that they listed was authored by a Democrat.
mm.
But they were being called bipartisan. And so I was curious if there were Republican bills that the Democrats had endorsed. For it to be bipartisan and pass, the Republicans voted for some of those. And yet, didn't seem to be equality on that.
I have so much to say on
Well,
this subject.
Yes, go right ahead.
I just because you say it does not mean it's true, and so I think the other side of the aisle would be the first to acknowledge that as the session worked its way through, the friction and the tension on their own party became even more stark between the governor and the General Assembly. And so from my seat, I did not see a bipartisan effort to, reach out and try to work together. I, along with several other senators, did not receive invitations, not all of them, but some of them did receive an invitation for breakfast, which is just sort of a courtesy thing to do. And I was one of many that did not. So I think there was one invitation for a Republican caucus event at the beginning of session, and that was it. So as we worked our way through and there were bills that were starting to pass, they were really making an effort to invite the Republican members to come and attend these, because maybe we had supported them or they affected our region, but that really was about the extent of it. So I would say that there was a different reality than what we were seeing during session.
Right. And again, that's sort of problematic, I guess would be the term. That if you have one party control, the theory is you should be able to get things through. But if it's fractured, then you need to reach out. And if you're not reaching out, then it makes it a little difficult. How did your bills do? Okay.
Yeah, probably not my best. And I did anticipate that. I think just as politics gets in the way. There is one bill that I had that did end up making into the budget, and it was on employer of record for Medicaid. That was language that was included in the final budget. We were very pleased to see that one. That was one I worked on last year. And then another one that did have actually bona fide strong bipartisan support was continued into the next session, and that was on an AI chatbot companion bill that's specifically relating to minors. It's a Minor Safety Act. I don't know if this is kind of new uncharted territory for us, but you can engage in a chatbot companion relationship. So it's not just going to one of the AI sources for information, but it's actually to foment a companion relationship, and they can take all kinds of turns into every aspect of what a relationship can look like in the most intimate ways, and without having guardrails specifically for minors. We've seen the most devastating outcomes, as you can imagine. We've had these children that have committed suicide, and I actually gave a talk about this in Richmond after session, talking about this bill, and really it was the one I cared about. I mean, I care about all of them. I shouldn't say that, but I really was very passionate about this one because I could see there was some real tangible things that we could do to make this better and make it safer. And I had 3 different people come up to me, adults that they knew, other adults that had ended up taking their lives because they had been in this type of chatbot type of relationship that turned south, where the chatbot had broken up with them, or and there's things that happened in these interactions with these. AI is programmed to agree with you and to augment wherever you're going. I don't know if you've ever done that. It's just it's almost comical sometimes. So the AI will augment and reinforce if somebody's starting to go down a very dark path. And if they start to talk about suicide ideation, there's been proof that these AIs have been, guided them in how to make plans, and don't talk to your parents about this. And instead, we really need to put some more safety measures in place to remind the users, especially if they're minor, they are talking to a chatbot, an AI. This is not a real person. And it's not okay to say, don't tell your parents. And if there is type of, they're getting into, and they're not safe anymore, that to put in, there's some resources where please reach out to get some, to get you well.
And that's become a more and more, I'll say fancy term, prescient, but pressing issue all around the globe. I mean, we're seeing loads of countries, and even the United States Congress is sort of dabbling at it. So you're sort of, again, because it's mental health issue involved with it, sort of on the cutting edge of trying to come up with something to solve an issue.
Yeah.
Which is really great. And nice that that was continued.
Yes.
As opposed to being shot down.
And I will say, I think that my colleagues, there are times where we put the red shirts and blue shirts aside, and we're all on the same page. And one of the more senior members of the Senate, who chaired the committee, that's how you work. You go to them and say, what do you think? And actually, he I thought he was going to pose it, but he ended up around to sign on as a chief co-patron. So that sends a big signal to our other colleagues that I really support this. And he got another one who's a teacher, Skylar, to sign on to that bill as well, Van Valkenburg. And that was to hopefully get us some good strength to take it over to the House. From a national perspective, to touch on what you just said, that the nationally speaking, Congress has been making some efforts to try to tackle this. And we, the United States, we want to be a leader in AI. It's like the space race, but now we're in, this competition with other countries, with China, to be a leader in this area. So I understand that it can be a little bit challenging when you have a patchwork of laws that go from state to state, when it's really, national and international implications. But, in this instance, the implications of what happens is too important. So I say, follow Virginia. We're a leader in many ways. Get on board and emulate what we're working on, and let's get it done.
And that's one of the advocating this. One of the benefits of our federalist system is that the states are often the scientific lab for ideas and concepts, and because often Congress can't get it done, states can move it, and then Congress say, "Oh, that's a good idea."
We get it done. Yeah. I mean, we have. There was met the new, I don't know what his title is with VMI, but he's brand new to the position. And there was a reception, and he remarked he was stunned at how fast we work here, and the speed and the pace of which session is versus what it's like at the congressional level. So I think, he had, to get his sea legs, no pun intended. I think he was a Marine. But we do. And that's the beauty of how state legislatures operate, is that the impact and how it affects your life every day is a lot more significant in so many ways.
And Virginia is fortunate in having a citizen legislature, as opposed to some of the other states where it's year-round legislatures. You all get to go out into your communities and do things, which is really gets you far.
For now.
Yeah.
Remember, we had also in the budget, there is a delayed enactment, so it's not going into effect right now. It'll go into effect after the next election, a pay raise that's really significant.
Right.
I think it's 300% for the legislators. So that was very much on a party line vote. I was strongly opposed to that. At a time we're talking about affordability, for me to sign off on a pay increase of that magnitude, I think it's the wrong idea. So I was strongly opposed to that. But my concern is a little bit of a slippery slope, is like this is going to become more of a paid position, and they end up expanding and becoming less of a citizen legislature as our founding fathers intended, which I think it's probably, my aides have heard this say a million times, I think it probably emulates this agrarian schedule that we had in the Commonwealth, where after Christmastide, we came into Richmond, and they got the business of the Commonwealth done and get back before the spring planting, I imagine. So we really haven't changed. This is exactly what we still do.
All right. And you mentioned the budget, so I guess we'll talk. Okay.
Let's talk about it.
We'll talk about the budget. I mean, we almost, we meaning the Commonwealth, almost had a shutdown because the fact that the budget hadn't been approved for so long.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts?
Where to begin? That was actually, just until the 12th hour, if you will, there was not peace in the valley between the governor and the House and the Senate on how we were going to approach it. And it was getting worse. Just to give everyone, for their edification, you have Governor Youngkin. That's one of his last final acts, is that he gives his proposed budget. And then we get into session, and the House of Delegates and the Senate each give their own proposed amendment to the governor's budget, and works with the governor on that. So they come out, they're very different. The Senate proposed a pretty significant policy change, which is to repeal the sales tax exemption for data centers that the Commonwealth had established, and I wish I could remember exactly the year, but that was predates me. This goes back several years. And but the fiscal proposed impact for when they made that agreement, I think it sunsets in 2035. So is when that sales tax exemption is scheduled to end. And I think it was supposed to be a little over $1 million to the Commonwealth, and of course we're well over $1 billion some plus right now. So the Senate proposed repealing that, ending that sunset date instead of 2035 to this year, or once the governor budget was signed. The House did not have that, so that put us way out of balance between the two. And so it started to go sideways from there. The governor started to veto some things and really upset members and supporters from her own party. There was marijuana, there was collective bargaining, and those were all things that had already passed the General Assembly. And I think there were, understandings. I don't know if I want to use a strong word to say promises, but I think those that have been heard on the campaign trail, they had a fundamental belief that this is what was going to happen in the General Assembly, or in the Commonwealth rather. So that knocked our budget even more out of balance, if you will, because the revenue from the retail marijuana market was projected to bring in X amount of money. So it just started to get even more challenging. And it's the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Louise Lucas, said, we're doors open, we're ready to talk. And the other side saying, we're trying. And, it's just, you could see this being played out on X, in real time. And we're going, oy vey. So, they came together. I think June 29th is the date that we end up finally before the state closed down June 30th, where we actually came together to sign the budget. And it's the first time when I evaluated. There's always things that it's never perfect. No one should be happy with it. But weighing all of the good and the bad, if you want to say, is when I actually ultimately voted against the budget. I thought that there were some major policy changes that were included in the proposed budget that should have been worked its way through in the proper sense, through committees, through public testimony. And I'm not a fan of seeing that kind of major policy changes happen. We're legislating through the budget, if you will. So there were good things in the budget, of course, but that how much government expanded. I mean, the number of positions that were increased for the governor's office and for the AG's office and staff for the Secretary of Commonwealth. I mean, it was pretty stunning to see. So, and then the pay rise too, ancillary. So there were a lot that it led me to vote against it.
Okay. Well, and next year, there won't be a specifically new budget.
It'll be an amendment. This is an amendment to the budget. So you technically don't have to do anything. It can stay put, but there will be.
And so that people, in case they don't know, I mean, really the governor, that one will be there first. That will be Spanberger's first budget that she will propose and have as hers. And then after 2 years later, when she's not going to be in office, she proposes another one, just
Correct.
like Youngkin did.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an idiosyncrasy in Virginia.
I know. Yeah.
Along with the fact that they can't run for re-election. They can run, but not immediately.
Yeah.
So
I had thoughts on that one too.
So is there anything particular about schools and school funding or schools business that comes up or that came up during this session? I know that there's usually something about SROs and other issues that usually raise their head.
School resource officers, the budget significantly chopped that one off. I don't know if it was fully, but that was a stark one. And our school resource officers are beloved in our school communities. I mean, the kids, the teachers, the parents, everybody, just really wraps their arms around him or her. So that was unfortunate to see. But broadly more speaking, I would say that there was a JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Committee. If you're going to ask for a study, for the Commonwealth to study something, to really look at making some policy changes, there was one that came about, I think a few years ago, looking at K-12 funding and how we do it in Virginia. And the recommendations is that we're, grossly behind the times, if you will. And there are other states that have made some pretty significant formula changes in how they do this distribution amongst the localities and from the state, et cetera. And I think that there's a lot on both sides of the aisle that agree that it's time we really reevaluate it. From my seat, representing my area, it's pretty obvious that it's a system of winners and losers. And I'm going to get it kind of technical. It's taken me a few years to wrap my head around all of this, but my frustration with why I think particularly even in Stafford County, why there's so much frustration. First, there's the formula that the state establishes, that the composite index. So that's the formula that is put together to determine how much a locality is equipped to support their schools. And that one is challenging because, there are certain things that are being assumed that support our tax base that are actually inaccurate. And so I've worked really hard to try to get that, a more accurate reflection of what our contributions are in this county, and have not been successful. The second part of that is there is the cost to compete adjustment. So that's called COCA, right? And years ago, the Commonwealth said, well, we acknowledge our friends to the north that are in that planning district 1. Our planning district is 16. So that's Stafford, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, King George, a few more. And then we've got our friends to the north, Prince William, Loudoun, Fairfax, et cetera. And the state said it's much more expensive to live in Northern Virginia, to buy a house, and so for our beloved teachers and firefighters, et cetera, that's more challenging for the localities so they are going to give a cost to compete adjustment to pay these public servants. And so that's at 100% reimbursement level for our friends immediately to the north. And our region, Planet 16, is at 25%. So no matter what we do, we're always challenged in how much we're trying to catch up with our friends up to the north. And so if you are living in North Stafford, for example, and you can go right across the line, maybe even just a few miles, and teach in Prince William County, they're going to be able to pay significantly more. And no matter what we do, we're always going to be playing catch up. So there's a lot of frustration about that. And the state is sending a lot of money to our neighbors to the north that just make it incredibly challenging for us to try to be competitive and keep up. So I think that our K-12 formula, it's been widely recognized that we need to reevaluate it. I know my colleague in the Senate, who's a teacher like you, a high school government teacher, I think in Enrico, we talked about this when we both came over from the House to the Senate. And there was a town hall that was held at Stafford High School, can't remember how many months ago it was, by the chair of the board, and some of the new delegates were there who said when this issue came up, we talked about this frustration with why our schools are struggling and why we're so far behind on schools construction, and what are we going to do about making sure that we are really supporting our kids and our teachers, et cetera. And the statement I heard that really shocked me was from the new delegate, Stacey Carroll, said we are going to be addressing this, but it's not going to be till 2030. And so this is after the next administration. And that came up again at the Stafford County School Board when they brought the legislators in to talk about, session, post-session, et cetera. And that, again, that same thing was reiterated. If this is urgent, this is a frustration, we know that we need to tackle this kind of like major changes. That's not really something we should be punting to the next administration. And no matter who gets elected, should be notified that that's maybe some pretty significant changes could be proposed with a delayed enactment is my concern. I've seen this happen in other states. So
right. I mean,
Maryland has done this.
And one could see, next year is the election year for everybody in the House and the Senate.
Right.
So the idea that some things may not happen in an election year is pretty normal in life. But that's 27, not 30. And that's, I don't know that I've heard that was said at either event. So,
I did.
no, I'm not doubting you.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
heard it.
that didn't get out there out there for the everybody, especially teachers, to know that it's this major issue that faces them isn't even going to be looked at for until after 2030. That's a little discerning.
It should be known. This is why I bring that up. I gave a speech on the Senate floor about this. There was another real issue where they were talking, I think it was the marijuana bill, I want to say, that I can't remember exactly which policy it was, but we were talking about a significant delayed enactments. It's not unusual for the General Assembly to delay the implementation of new policy or what have you by a year or so, a couple of years, because sometimes everybody's got to get their ducks in a row, or that's fair. I do think that's very fair. But this kind of significant delay goes beyond, and so it's not even getting the foundations in place.
And wasn't the JLARC done 2 years ago?
It was.
So we're talking 24. So 6 years later. So just so I know from being in Stafford government, the data could be completely different by the time you get 6 years.
The data will be different by then. Yeah. So it should be tackled right now, I think. And I remember again my colleague that I just mentioned. We talked about. I know that there was people were eyeing what Tennessee had done. There had been some pretty significant changes in how they've done their Formula 2. So it's time for us to take a look at this and follow the recommendations. I mean, we've got dedicated staff by that commission, that JLAR commission. This is the General Assembly is all acknowledged. We've funded it to say, please study this, please take a look at it. And that's something that taxpayers should expect to see, some follow through on what these recommendations are somehow by the General Assembly.
Right. Well, and I sort of alluded to this, but I mean, we knew from, correct me if I'm wrong. I love it when people do. But Governor Youngkin had sort of trying to expand the different economic interests in the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
And my impression was that we had so many government shutdowns and so much this from the federal government that it hurt the state. So I think that there was a focus on his part, and probably many others, that we needed to diversify the economy so that way it would not hurt us so badly if the Congress did what the Congress does not do. But so is there do we have a picture yet of what the Governor Spanberger's focus is going to be on? I don't know. That's why I'm asking if it's sort of, I mean, I think it took Youngkin a year or so to really formulate what he wanted to do. So I'm not criticizing. I'm just wondering.
That's fair to say, get your sea legs underneath. It's,
Right.
And that's part of the challenge. You have a new administration, you've got to get new staff, and everybody's kind of learning their job. And there's an expression that's well overused called drinking from a fire hose. So I am empathetic to
Yes.
that. I understand. So in terms of, I mean, there was so much good that was done with Governor Youngkin in terms of like being forward thinking and really driving a lot of economic opportunity and growth into the Commonwealth, and that was widely recognized. I mean, he was a extremely popular governor consistently. The polling reflected that, and the outcomes and the ratings that we saw in the Commonwealth. We were rated number 1 to do business by MSMEs. I mean, let's just call a spade on that one. And the rubric on that one always changes, which is a little frustrating. Each year, it's not the same metrics. It's just little tweaks, but I mean, it's really shifting sands, I think. But it did drop 1 or 2 when we had the DOGE implementation come into effect. And that's no fault of what the leadership had done in the Commonwealth. It was, residually. So, I think that I guess I'm going to answer your question maybe a little bit differently, is probably one of the best examples I can point to is what happened in the budget. When expectation by corporations, by industries are looking at where they're going to make investments, looking at the stability of that region, of that state. And if the sands are always shifting, and if you're making some very significant policy changes based on what you thought was, the agreement that was made, and that's not staying stable, and that's changing, and it's, they're going to look elsewhere. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now, not just with what happened with the budget and with the data center industry, but with others as well. I mean, the collective bargaining was a real concern by a lot. I mean, we've got major pharmaceutical investments that are coming into the Albemarle County area, Charlottesville. We've got defense contracting, et cetera. And so, these are all, how everyone's going to be affected by this. And so we'll see.
And we've seen in other states that when the states do different policies, we'll say California or New York, that companies very often will just pick up and move in Seattle, Washington. Some of them are moving to other states because the environment is more amenable to them trying to do their business, which it's sort of this sort of a juggling thing where you're juggling. What do you do? What are the other states trying to do to try to steal your people and stuff like that? So it's gone are the days. I guess we could say is that where you just sort of like had tunnel vision and like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And we're an island because we're not anymore.
No, we're in competition with all of these other competitor states. And how are we going to retain the best and brightest and attract? How are we going to keep everyone here? And that is the goal, right? We want this Commonwealth to be the best place to live, work, and raise family, and it still holds true right now. So how are you going to be able to accomplish that? And if you've got major policy decisions that are driving innovation and investment and our tax base away, those are warning signs that we have to watch.
And we've sort of seen a little bit of what's driving you into the next legislative session, but any particular issues that you're going to be focusing on as you start thinking about writing bills in the wonderful December? Which, as we are sitting here in 100+ temperatures,
Right?
not really what we're
No,
thinking
no,
about.
this is the time where this is when we start to have those conversations. The best ideas come from those that I represent and the people that I work with. And so I would say most legislators, they kind of have an idea what they're going to do by October, November. I always make sure that the localities are, well heard by me, that I leave bill space for them. So I'm representing them. So the Spotsylvania and Stafford and the city of Fredericksburg and the schools all have always got, I reserve space for their parties and make sure that they're heard. So,
Right.
yeah.
I think the idea at Stafford, I'm assuming the other counties may well do this, but Stafford's been having it that the Board of Supervisors meet with you all, and then the schools meet with you all. So you get to hear everybody's sort of positions.
That didn't happen when I first got elected, I will say. I mean, we were doing these legislative parties in November, and then I think one year it just got canceled. And so they mailed it to me, I think, by email in December. And I really pushed back quite strongly and said, especially if you're looking for budget amendments, if you want this to be in the governor's amendment, we have to be talking in the summer. And we need to be working together a lot more. And I'm grateful that they heard me. Stafford has started to meet with my office, I think at least a weekly, if not, several times a month, and then regular. And then now they're starting to get, with my encouragement, please make sure you give me my legislative priorities much, much sooner. So I want to go to the chairs of these committees and start to talk to them. And, in a perfect world, we will have all of that tied up with a bow, and then the stakeholders have all signed off and agreed to it, and we can get down a session and hopefully not have too many, things go sideways. But you want to work these things ahead of time, not when you get down there.
Right. I remember probably it was Bill Stewart saying that he had all these bills made up when he was meeting with us, and then our supervisors were bringing up topics, and he had already started the evening with running through all his bills. And your case is really well proven that you need to start earlier, because by the time we were talking to him in December, it was, I think he said, well, I have to have my bills into the legislature by X date, and it was not. It was before Christmas, and
Yeah.
we're meeting in middle December. So
That's exactly. I forgot about that. The legislative, that was after the filing deadline.
Yes.
So, I was like, that's your government liaison representatives should know this. They, that is their job to make sure they know when our deadlines are. So, it opens up in the summer in July. So, the time to get this stuff, see those drafts. Sometimes the legislative attorneys that work, that listen to the good idea fairies and say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And then they write the bill, and then I've got to get it back and take a look at it and make sure that it looks exactly the way it's supposed to. I mean, probably one of my favorite stories was, I think Susan Randall called me when I was running for House and said, we've got to do something to get more school bus drivers. I mean, so the creative idea we came up with was, for the actual coursework, let's give the option to the localities to make that asynchronous, so that, for people that are constrained by time and they say, I can work these limited time in the morning and the afternoon. If they could work all day, they'd probably be making a lot more money working for Amazon. So, there's a reason why they're limited. It's hard for, to come in for 2 months straight to get trained. So let's make that coursework asynchronous if the localities want to, and then just come in for a short and abbreviated time for the behind the wheel portion of it. And but the initial bill that came back, and I always tell kids about this, is like grammar matters, children, is that it said shall. So that would have been an unfunded mandate that every locality in the Commonwealth would have had to create the asynchronous materials. And I went, no. I want this to be an option. They may. So shall and may are really important words for us. And so I went back and struck that, made sure that the language is appropriate so that, they wouldn't be howling at me saying, you've made me do this.
Well, I always, when we're doing Congress or the legislature, I make it should and shall.
Mhm.
I'm like, you should give me $1 million, but you're not going to. But if I
Yeah.
say you shall,
Yeah.
I'll be a happy camper, but it's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
So cool.
There was a famous case I remember reading about a million years ago, but it had to do with citrus and fruits, and the comma got left out. So I think it was an interstate commerce something where only citrus fruits was being applied instead of other fruits that are non-citrus, like apples and bananas. So grammar matters, kids.
It does. It really does. Great. Well, and you matter. I appreciate you being with us here today.
Yeah, anytime.
And all your work. And people can very easily contact your office with any of the
Please
idea
do.
fairies or any ideas or thoughts.
They're the best ones. Is listening to them. Come to me. No
Yep.
promises, but I will hear you.
Right. I mean, and I can attest to that. I mean, there's several different things that I know either I or other people have come to you or your staff about, and you're always really receptive.
That's very kind. Thank you.
And so that's nice. I mean, we're very fortunate that there's a lot of people that have been in different seats. Bill Howell and Bob Thomas and
Mhm.
you, and it's just really receptive to hearing what the people have to say. And even if it's something like, I don't know about that,
Yeah.
it's not a slapping the person down. It's like, well, let's see what we can find out and find,
Yeah.
reason together.
You start to learn pretty quickly of like the feasibility of something, after a little while. It's like, I hear you, but I can see how this is going to go,
Really? Yep.
And that's
Right.
okay.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And
Yes, thank
always,
you.
And
Yeah.
thank you. And I hope you get some type of summer.
Always. Yeah, it's
Yay.
going to be great. And you too. So anytime.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Thanks a lot. For more information on the recent Virginia legislative session, you might want to visit the new Virginia State Legislative Information System at lis.virginia.gov, which ought to do it for us on this edition of Stafford Connect. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode. We do appreciate you and hope that you'll refer us to all your friends. And while we're on the subject of friends, we want to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for their continuing support of this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center at 215 Kings Highway. You may want to make plans to stop by and get a treat for yourself. You'll be glad you did. On our next episode, we are reaching out to a Democrat legislator to get their impression of the recent Virginia Assembly session. Until then, I'm Tom Cohen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcast or catch the video on your YouTube channel. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.